All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kelly Timko, and I'm with the Business Development Department at Galarath. In order to make sure we stay on our schedule, we're going to go ahead and get started. All lines have been placed on mute to avoid any background noise, but if you have any questions or you need any help, you can use the chat function to speak with me. We will have time for a question and answer session at the conclusion of the presentation, and this webinar is being recorded and it will be available for additional viewing in a day. So today, Dan Kennedy, our Director of Estimation Services and a 30-year veteran of the aerospace manufacturing arena, will discuss some of the more pressing challenges facing the manufacturing industry, their significant impacts, and what the benefits are of better and best practice. Through Dan's client interactions, he's observed why knowing the should cost of their products through a streamlined estimation process has facilitated their company to win business, perform effectively, and increase profits. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dan, presenting today's webinar, Should Cost Analysis Leads to Greater Profit, Winning, Performing, and Profiting. Dan.
Thank you, Kelly. Hello, folks. Thanks for joining me this morning. My name is Dan Kennedy. That's a picture of me on the right, the face that's destined for radio. Thankfully, I'm an engineer. I get up every day and I try and change the world, and I really, really do love my job. More precisely, I'm an engineer in manufacturing. Been doing that for about 30 years, all of my career, decades. I've started out on the shop floor like many of you perhaps, and progressed into leadership in predominantly aerospace manufacturing. I've worked with a lot of people, a lot of platforms, worked on a lot of programs, and I've always viewed my job as the opportunity to work with people that need help realizing their goals, whether that's building a new aircraft, whether that's components to the aircraft, whether that's people from the shop floor learning new skills and being having a good job. I've just always viewed myself as a facilitator for success in the world to make all these great things we make. For the last number of years, I've been working at helping other manufacturers try and be more successful. And I've come across a couple of examples that weren't obvious to me when I was in the trenches, but I'd like to share some of these with you folks today. And it has to do with what I call should cost analysis. So I'm calling this discussion should cost analysis leads to greater profits, because I see there's a lot of opportunity there for people, and they may not be paying enough attention to it. The company I work for is called Galarath. I think Kelly's done that introduction pretty well. We do predictive analytic solutions. We've been in business for 30 years. We're employee-owned, and we've got hundreds of world-class customers, many of the aerospace primes, many Fortune 500 companies. So that's the only advertising you're going to get on this from me, because I said I'm an engineer. We've got some really bright people that are in the sales force that can assess your needs and help you with the solutions that you might want. The problem that I've seen throughout my career, working in the office, working on the floor, is that organizations need to win work. That's first and foremost. I've been in the sales force proposing to customers. Once you win the work, of course, you need to perform on the work, and you need to understand what you've just sold so that you can put the resources on it and deliver it. And at the end of the day, organizations need to make a profit on their work, and they don't stay in business. They go out of business and can't grow. These are the pains and the privileges. These are all the challenges that we all face. Everybody in the industry that I've ever worked for, ever worked with, is facing the same challenge. They need to win. They need to perform. And at the end of the day, they need to make a profit. I've found that to be successful, organizations need to understand and manage the materials they buy and the labor they use in their products. And should key is that cost. Even if you're buying semi-finished goods, there's a labor component and a materials component coming from your suppliers. The more you understand what you're asking of your suppliers and of yourselves, the better the opportunity you have to manage those challenges and to be successful. So I've come to conclude that should cost is a key to thriving. You know what you're selling should cost, and you know what you're buying should cost. There's nothing magical here. Manufacturing is really just made up of a couple of things: materials and labor. No longer are governments issuing contracts for materials and labor. They're competing all that work out in the market with experts at delivering on those things. And if you understand what your materials and labors are, then you can sell it on the market, and the profit comes about when you sell your products for more than what your costs are. But many times we don't understand how much what we're buying should cost. It goes into to a specialized manufacturer who also buys materials and also applies labor and sells it to you. Then you take those materials, you add your own labor, you increase its value, and you sell it to your customer. But how do you know how much your materials really should cost, or what your labor should cost out in a competitive market? If you understand those details, it'll allow you to make intelligent decisions about buying your materials and about manufacturing your products. You might decide you need to improve your manufacturing processes. There's a lot of folks in the industry today spending a lot of money on evaluating their internal processes, doing value stream mapping and Kaizen events and lean manufacturing, applying those principles. And those are all very, very important. It would be helpful, and it seems to me it's helpful, if you can understand what your real cost drivers are in the products you sell, so that you can focus your efforts more directly on the things that will make a difference for you. Here's a simple case on how those things can work. Many companies that I've been working with end up with a ratio of materials to labor of about 1/3 materials and 2/3 labor and 10% profit. That's sort of a benchmark for where much of what I've seen lands on. If, in fact, you were able to save 10% on the materials you buy, the subassemblies you buy from your suppliers, you could boost your profits 33%. Your profits would go from 10% to 13% because that 3.3% rolled right to the bottom line. Similarly, if you look at your labor at 67% of your costs, a 10% savings there would roll up to a 67% improvement in your bottom line. If you do them both, then you could virtually double your profit or cut the price of your products 10% and be a lot more competitive in the market. That's the little charts on the right show you what the accountants might see as you make these changes. And I think everybody would realize that increasing the profit is going to be a good thing to satisfy most of the accounting people and most of the business people and the stockholders. So this is a good thing, and the opportunities lie both in materials and in the labor. I don't see as much effort today, haven't seen as much effort in my history of people trying to understand their material side of this equation as opposed to the labor side of their equation. But that's probably because I've been in operations and not so much in procurement. Recently, though, we've seen a number of cases where people are focusing on the whole manufacturing chain and having some really outstanding successes, being more competitive in the market and adding to their bottom line. In the first case I've seen, and this you can find on our website in a white paper that they wrote up for us and explained what they did and how they did it and what the results were. There was an iconic aircraft manufacturer that was really struggling in the market. He was generally known, it's a household name. Everybody would know this aircraft manufacturer. But it was being severely challenged by competitors in the market. They were not selling the aircraft they needed to at a time when they should have been selling a lot of aircraft for a particular market. So their objectives were to cut costs on the aircraft and sell more aircraft. They decided they were going to go into a redesign for an aircraft that had been out there and they'd been offering for decades. And they were going to use design-to-cost tools. Some of the tools they used were what we call top-down parametric tools. Those are very good for taking a high-level view of what you seek to achieve and putting a baseline down. They baselined their design goals, how much they thought it might cost, what the schedules might look like. And once they put their plan together and started work, they enabled a bottoms-up estimating tool. And this was part of an integrated product team where estimators were hooked directly with the design engineers. The things that they were doing were going with the designers. And they implemented design to cost techniques into this. They used the bottoms up estimating where they looked at the materials they were buying, they looked at what they were doing internally, they looked at how much these things should cost, and they made make-buy decisions. They decided while they could build them internally, it may be more cost-effective to send them out. Once they had made those decisions, they used the data that was provided in these tools to go ahead and establish should-cost benchmarks for the suppliers that they were negotiating with. They had some insight into what the materials were and how much labor, how much machine time, how much welding, how much heat treat, all of those processes that go into making that part should cost. They used industry standard data from a lot of the aircraft manufacturers and a lot of manufacturers that were doing those processes, essentially standard data that was out there in the industry, and established these should cost benchmarks and had frank and open discussions with their suppliers about what these things should cost and where they stood. They chose the best value for them and for their suppliers, and they made some really remarkable savings. I would say unusually high cost savings on their production, but it had been some time since they'd looked at these things. Again, you can read the white paper on that, look at all the details. But as a consequence of this, their order book is up. They're selling more aircraft. They're grabbing increased market share. They've increased their profits. And what are they going to do with that additional money? They can pay it off as dividends. They can make new internal investments for the future. They've got options now that they didn't have before they started taking a look at what things should cost. And again, they looked at it from the supply chain perspective, from their internal manufacturing perspective, and did a redesign and made good decisions about how they were going to build this next generation of aircraft. Another case that I've seen is more targeted to the supply chain side of this. Once again, it's a very large integrator of aircraft structures, and their senior management realized that most of the money that they were spending was flowing through supply chain management, and that their real opportunity to be more profitable was to go ahead and look at should cost for the things they were buying. Their mandate was to make it more profitable. This manufacturer had quite a few long-term fixed-price contracts. They negotiated many-year contracts on these things, but they were also buying just thousands and thousands of parts from common off-the-shelf items to major sub-assemblies, bringing them into their plant, assembling them into a final good, and selling them. Now this company had historically had the capability internally to make just about everything they needed. But was that the right decision to make? They didn't know. They had to take a look at what things should cost against what they were costing them to build today. And they also wanted to look at foreign suppliers. They wanted to go to China, to go to Mexico, to go to all these foreign countries, maybe take advantage of the lower labor rates, maybe take advantage of the lower costs. They wanted a way to assess those things in their make-buy decisions. They looked at economic order quantities. I think everybody in manufacturing realizes if you build one of a thing is going to be extraordinarily expensive, but you don't want to store a whole plant full of spare parts that you might need 9 months from now. What they did was they took a look at all of these things they were buying and went out to suppliers to negotiate based on industry standards for labor, for the labor processes, what they knew of the materials that they were buying, because they knew what the price of the materials were. Their strategy they took was bottoms up. They modeled the processes that went into creating all the components and all the subassemblies they were buying. They did bottoms up estimates. They're not done with this yet. They're currently in process. They've got quite a bit of opportunity identified. They're in process now, negotiating with their suppliers. The reports that we're getting on these things are that they are exceeding the 10% savings, in some cases greatly exceeding the 10% savings that they were hoping for, that made it all worthwhile for them. So they have the opportunity here to make a lot of money and make the same decisions that many of us get to make, whether they expand their operations, expand their market share, or just take higher profits and build for the future. So again, we gave these people some opportunities here. There are a lot of other ways that people are using these should cost estimating tools. Another case that I've seen recently is where they have integrated should cost into redesigns. Another iconic aircraft manufacturer using top down and bottoms up to assess and ensure the cost savings for design changes. Anytime you make a design change to an aircraft, there are a lot of costs associated with requalifying those things and making sure that in the most highly regulated industry on the planet almost, that what you're offering out there is safe, reliable, and is qualified. So in this case, their estimators are directly supporting their design engineers. They're getting real-time feedback to the engineering group about what the changes they're proposing, what the changes they're designing are likely to cost. Nobody wants to get a design complete, throw it out to procurement, and have procurement come back and say, wow, the price just doubled on this. The engineers don't want to have to go back and do that redesign for cost, design to cost. It's expensive. It doesn't give you the opportunity to realize the savings that you otherwise could, because design engineering and qualifications quite expensive. Many of the companies that we work with are using these should cost estimating tools in their bids and proposals. They look at what their customers are asking them to bid on, banging those against their capabilities, making go, no-go decisions based on what the industry standards tell them the market price for those things are. They're doing risk assessment. Once you know how much the market expects to pay for the things you manufacture, you can determine where to set your price point and what sorts of risks you might take, what sorts of opportunities you might have to go in and refine your processes and refine your pricing to win that work. Out of these tools will often come the labor based on industry standards, which will tell you overall in the industry what sorts of resources you need to apply to these programs to make them successful and deliver on time. And then when you win, or when you go out to negotiate the basis of estimates with your customers or with your suppliers, when you have those discussions and negotiations, and they can be cumbersome. If you have a good communication tool, if you have got well-documented basis of estimates that you can speak to the customer or speak to your supplier, people will often discuss the hours it takes to do a job and the material costs to do a job. They don't necessarily want to tell you what all their internal accounting architecture is, but it's much easier to have a discussion about level of effort than it is about dollars, particularly in those kind of negotiations. things boil out. Your suppliers may have missed something in their estimate to you. Your customer may be gilding something, or you may be gilding it for the customer. May not really be what they want. So these tools can be very, very useful in having a discussion and getting on the same page and in managing the expectations of your expectations versus your customers versus your suppliers. So we see that being used an awful lot with these sorts of tools. I guess my final message, my bottom line of this message really is that we all go to work every day. We tend to work on the things that we think are important. And I would just challenge you to think a little bit about how much the things that you're working on should cost and how much the things you think you're buying should cost, because there's a lot of opportunity in there. I've shown you a couple of successes. There's more data out on our website if you folks want to look at it. This isn't an easy process. It takes a lot of effort. It's hard work. Find some tools that you like, that you're good with. You might have them internally. I would suggest that you look for tools that give you insight into what the rest of the industry is doing. It's rewarding work, and I found it personally rewarding and professionally rewarding, but every company is different. Your mileage may vary. You may be the best in class at all of these things. But if you're interested in our help or pursuing opportunities to help you be more successful, contact us. Talk to one of our sales folks. Push the little button down at the bottom of this invite. Ask for more information. We can help you with services. We can help you with products. But I would suggest you do it, because there is a lot of opportunity in there to save your company money and make it be more profitable. I guess that's about all I want to say about you folks should be doing should cost estimating, because there's money to be made there.